David Miller had always been a man of quiet strength. To the outside world, he was nothing more than the night janitor at Westbridge Enterprises, the sprawling company with its glass towers and expensive suits rushing through the lobby each morning. He wore the same faded navy uniform every day, his name embroidered in white thread just above his chest. His hands were rough from years of mopping floors, fixing leaks, and scrubbing stubborn stains that no one else cared to notice. But behind those weary hands lay a story few people knew. David wasn't just a janitor. He was a guardian, a man who had given up everything to make sure one young girl could have the future he never did. That girl was Mia. Mia had been only 10 years old when tragedy struck. Her parents, David's younger brother and sister-in-law, were killed in a car accident on a rainy evening, leaving her orphaned and alone. David, who had never married and had no children of his own, didn't hesitate. He took her in, moving her into his small 2-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of town. He became her guardian, her provider, and eventually her hero. The early years were hard. David's job as a janitor didn't pay much, but he worked overtime whenever he could. His body ached from the double shifts. Yet every time he saw Mia sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out in front of her, determination in her young eyes, he felt a surge of strength. He wanted her to have a better life. He wanted her to have opportunities he had never been given. So, when Mia's teachers began telling him how bright she was and how she had the potential to attend a good university, David made a decision that would change both of their lives. He would put away every spare dollar for her education. It wasn't easy. David sold his old pickup truck and began taking the bus to work. He canceled his cable subscription and cut down to the cheapest phone plan available. Many nights, he skipped dinner altogether, telling Mia he had already eaten at work, just so she could have a proper meal. There were moments when he felt like giving up, like when the rent increased and he had to pick up extra janitorial shifts at other buildings on weekends just to make ends meet. There were times when his back hurt so badly he could barely stand, yet he pushed himself to keep going. He reminded himself that every aching muscle, every hour of lost sleep, every penny saved was an investment in Mia's future. Mia, at first, was incredibly grateful. She would hug him tightly after school and tell him how much she loved him. On the nights when David returned home late, exhausted and smelling faintly of cleaning chemicals, she would leave a plate of food on the table for him, covered carefully so it stayed warm. "I'm going to make you proud one day, Uncle David," she would say with the fierce conviction of a child who believed anything was possible. "When I graduate, you won't have to work anymore. I promise." David would smile tiredly, his heart swelling with pride. "You already make me proud, kiddo," he would reply, ruffling her hair. "Just keep working hard, and that's all I'll ever ask." Years passed, and Mia grew into a bright, beautiful young woman. She was popular in school, but she never let her grades slip. David went to every parent-teacher meeting, every school play, every sports event she participated in, no matter how tired he was. He was always there in the audience, clapping the loudest. When the day finally came for Mia to receive her acceptance letter to a prestigious university, David cried for the first time in years. She had done it. She had earned her place at one of the best schools in the state. But with that joy came a new challenge: tuition. Even though David had been saving for years, the cost was higher than he had anticipated. Without hesitation, he took out a loan in his own name, knowing it would take him years to pay off. He didn't tell Mia about the loan. He didn't want her to feel guilty. Instead, he smiled when she opened the letter, hugged her tightly, and said, "Pack your bags, kiddo. You're going to college." Those first months after she left for school were lonely for David. The apartment felt empty without her laughter echoing in the halls. He kept himself busy by working longer hours, often volunteering to cover extra shifts. The other janitors thought he was crazy, but David didn't mind. Every paycheck he received went toward Mia's tuition, textbooks, and living expenses. When she called asking for money for something extra, like a new laptop or a field trip, David always found a way to make it happen. He lived simply, almost frugally, but it never bothered him. When he walked to the university campus to drop off a care package, seeing Mia laughing with her friends or running to class, he felt an indescribable pride. He never told Mia or anyone, that he was more than just a janitor. In truth, David had a hidden life that no one at the company knew about. Years ago, before he ever became a janitor, David had inherited shares of Westbridge Enterprises from his father, who had been one of the founding partners. Over time, through smart investments and quiet boardroom decisions, David had gained majority control of the company. He had chosen to live as a janitor not because he needed the money, but because he wanted to understand every level of the business, from the ground up. No one knew the man who scrubbed floors was actually the one signing their paychecks. But David didn't care about recognition. He cared about Mia's future. And so he worked silently, day after day, his heart full of hope that when Mia finally graduated, she would see that all of his sacrifices had been worth it. Mia's first year of college was filled with excitement and discovery. She called David almost every evening to tell him about her professors, her new friends, and the club she had joined. He would sit in his small kitchen after work, listening to her chatter over the phone while drinking reheated coffee. Those conversations became the highlight of his nights. But as the semesters passed, the calls became less frequent. At first, David didn't mind. He figured Mia was simply busy. After all, college life was demanding, and she had to focus on her studies. But slowly, a shift began. Mia started talking less about her classes and more about parties, fancy restaurants, and the new clothes she wanted to buy. When she came home for holidays, David noticed small changes. She began dressing differently, her style more polished and expensive. She had new jewelry, trendy handbags, and a phone that was 3 times the price of the one she left with. "Where did you get all this?" David asked one evening as she dropped her suitcase in the living room. "Oh, just some stuff I bought with my own money," she replied casually. "I got a part-time job at a cafe near campus." David smiled, proud that she was working, but he knew a cafe job wouldn't pay for half the things she now owned. He decided not to push her about it. Instead, he took her out to dinner at her favorite local diner, just like they used to. But as they sat there eating, he saw her glance around, almost as though she was embarrassed to be seen in such a small, inexpensive place. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked gently. "Yeah," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "It's just different from the places I usually eat now. That's all." Her words stung more than she realized. David had always been proud of the little traditions they shared. Saturday morning pancakes, late-night movie marathons, cheap ice cream cones after school. But now he could feel her pulling away. She was outgrowing those simple moments, and by extension, outgrowing him. As time went on, Mia's social life began to revolve around a group of wealthy classmates. They came from powerful families with vacation homes, luxury cars, and trust funds waiting for them after graduation. Mia blended in so well that most of them never realized she had been raised by a man who worked as a janitor. When David came to visit her campus one weekend, wearing his usual work clothes because he had come straight from his shift, Mia seemed tense. She introduced him to her friends quickly, almost dismissively. "This is my uncle," she said, avoiding eye contact as her friends nodded politely. David smiled warmly and extended a hand to each of them, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Mia was embarrassed by him. The laughter she shared with her friends grew quieter whenever he was around, and the conversation shifted to topics that made him feel out of place. Luxury vacations, expensive cars, business internships in high-rise offices. Later that evening, after her friends had gone, David tried to talk to her. "You know you don't have to hide where you came from, right?" he said softly. "There's no shame in hard work, Mia." She hesitated, then sighed. "I know, Uncle David, but people just don't understand. It's different here. Everyone comes from money, and when they find out my uncle's a janitor, they look at me differently. They act like I don't belong." David's chest tightened. "Mia, you do belong, because of your hard work, not because of how much money anyone thinks you have. And for the record, I'm proud of what I do. I'm not ashamed of it, and you shouldn't be either." She nodded slowly, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. Months later, Mia graduated with honors. David had never been so proud as he sat in the audience, still in his uniform because he'd rushed from work to make it on time. He clapped until his hands hurt when her name was called. After the ceremony, Mia's friends gathered to take pictures with their families. Their parents arrived in sleek cars, dressed in designer suits and elegant dresses. David stood off to the side, holding a bouquet of flowers he had bought with the last of his spare cash that month. When Mia finally came over, she hugged him quickly and smiled for a photo, but David noticed how quickly she moved on to take pictures with her friends and their families. "You ready to go celebrate?" David asked, his smile hopeful. "Actually," Mia said hesitantly, "my friends are taking me to a really nice restaurant downtown. It's kind of fancy. I don't think you like it there." David felt the sting of those words, but nodded anyway. "That's okay. You go enjoy yourself. I'll be here when you get back." But Mia never came back that night. Instead, she posted pictures online of herself and her friends celebrating at a 5-star restaurant, drinking champagne and laughing. David saw them while scrolling through his phone before bed, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. In the weeks that followed, Mia got a job at a prestigious firm in the city. She moved into a luxury apartment with one of her wealthy friends and started attending high-profile networking events. David visited her once, bringing a home-cooked meal as a surprise, but she seemed distant, distracted. "Uncle David, you really didn't have to bring this," she said, setting the container on the counter. "I usually order in or go out with my coworkers. It's just easier." David smiled faintly, hiding his disappointment. "I just wanted to make sure you had a taste of home. Thought you might miss it." She kissed him on the cheek, but quickly went back to answering emails on her phone. David sat there quietly for a few minutes before standing up to leave. "I should get going," he said. "You seem busy." "Thanks for stopping by," she said distractedly, barely looking up. As David rode the bus home that night, he stared out the window at the city lights and wondered if Mia was slipping away from him completely. He had sacrificed so much, his time, his health, his own comfort, just to make sure she had a better future. And now that she had it, it felt like she was shutting him out of it. Still, David refused to give up on her. "She's just finding her way," he told himself quietly. "She'll come around." He held on to that hope, not knowing that the true test of their relationship was yet to come. David had always been patient with Mia, even as she became more distant. He reminded himself that she was young, adjusting to her new life, and that it was normal for her priorities to change. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment when everything came crashing down. It started one warm Friday evening, when Mia invited him to dinner at her apartment. David was pleasantly surprised. He hadn't seen much of her in recent weeks, so he took extra care to shower after work, shave, and put on the cleanest shirt he owned. When he arrived, he found Mia glowing, dressed elegantly, with a sparkle in her eyes he hadn't seen in a long time. "You look happy," David said warmly as he stepped inside. "I am," she said, beaming. "Uncle David, I have news. I'm seeing someone." David smiled. "That's wonderful, kiddo. Tell me about him." "His name is Ryan," she said, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and pride. "He's smart, ambitious, and he works at Westbridge just like you do." David raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "He's not just any employee," she went on, her excitement building. "He's one of the rising stars in the company. Everyone says he's going to be promoted to an executive position soon. And he comes from an amazing family. His parents own several businesses, and they're incredibly well-connected. He could really help me get ahead in my career." David felt a twinge in his chest. "You sound like you really like him." "I do," Mia admitted. But then she hesitated, as though she had something else to say. "Actually, that's why I want to talk to you tonight. I think it's time I moved on from the past." David frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Mia took a deep breath, her tone turning serious. "Uncle David, you've done so much for me, and I'll always be grateful, but I think it's time for me to stand on my own 2 feet. I don't want to depend on you anymore. Ryan and I are building a future together, and I can't keep letting people see me as the girl who was raised by a janitor." The words hit David like a blow. He set down the glass of water he'd been holding, staring at her. "Mia, is that how you see me? Just a janitor?" Mia's eyes flickered with guilt, but she held her ground. "I'm not saying that to hurt you. It's just that people judge, Uncle David. When they find out what you do, they treat me differently. Ryan's family is very traditional. They value status, appearances, I don't want to embarrass him. David's throat tightened. He had spent years working himself to the bone, sacrificing everything to give her this very life she was living. And now she was ashamed of him? Mia, he said quietly, everything I did for you. The long nights, the double shifts, the money for your tuition. I didn't do it so you could be embarrassed of me. I'm not embarrassed, Mia insisted, but her voice wavered. I want to move forward. I want to be with Ryan, and to do that, I need to leave the past behind. You've done your part. Now it's my turn to take care of myself. David felt something inside him crack. For years he had imagined this moment, her standing on her own, independent and successful, but he had never imagined it would feel like this. He nodded slowly, his face expressionless. If that's what you want, Mia. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it back gently. I should go, he said softly, his voice heavy. Uncle David. It's fine, he said, forcing a small smile. You don't owe me anything. I just hope you remember where you came from. Someday. With that, he stood and walked to the door. His shoulders were heavy, his steps slow, as though each one cost him something. Mia watched him leave, her stomach twisting. She told herself she was doing the right thing, that she was simply growing up, setting boundaries, making choices for her future. But as the door clicked shut, a strange emptiness settled over her apartment. David walked through the city streets that night in a daze, his thoughts a whirlwind. He ended up at a small park near his apartment and sat on a bench, staring at the ground. The pain in his chest was sharp, but more than that, he felt an aching disappointment. He had raised Mia to value kindness, humility, and gratitude. He had hoped that when she stepped into her new world, she would carry those values with her. Instead, it seemed the world had changed her. And yet, even in his hurt, David couldn't bring himself to hate her. He remembered the little girl who used to wait for him by the window, the teenager who had promised she'd make him proud. Somewhere inside the sophisticated young woman was still that little girl. He had to believe that. Still, a deep sadness settled over him as he returned home. For the first time in years, he didn't pack Mia a lunch for the next day or set aside money for her expenses. He lay awake late into the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it failed her somehow. Meanwhile, Mia was swept further into Ryan's world. Ryan introduced her to his family, who welcomed her politely but with thinly veiled curiosity. So, tell us about your family, Ryan's mother asked one evening over dinner. Mia hesitated, then said vaguely, I was raised by my uncle. He's in maintenance work. Ryan's father nodded politely, but Mia noticed a subtle glance he exchanged with his wife. She felt her cheeks burn. After dinner, Ryan told her gently, You don't have to be ashamed, Mia, but I do understand why you want to keep certain things private. My parents can be judgmental. That night, Mia lay awake next to Ryan, her thoughts drifting back to David. She tried to push the guilt away. He'll be okay, she told herself. He's always okay. But deep down, she knew she had hurt him more than she wanted to admit. And what she didn't know was that the man she had dismissed as just a janitor was about to reveal a side of himself that would change her life forever. The weeks after David left Mia's apartment were strangely quiet. He didn't call her, didn't stop by, and didn't send her the little care packages he used to. At first, Mia barely noticed. Her life had become a whirlwind of networking events, late-night parties with Ryan's friends, and dinners at expensive restaurants. But slowly, a strange feeling began to settle in her chest, a nagging guilt she couldn't shake. Whenever she saw David's name in her phone contacts, she hesitated, her finger hovering over it before putting the phone down. She told herself she would call him tomorrow. Then tomorrow became next week. Then, one evening, Ryan surprised her. My company is hosting a major corporate event next weekend, he said, smiling proudly. They're unveiling a new initiative, and the CEO is supposed to make an appearance. It's a pretty big deal. I want you to come with me. Mia's eyes lit up. Of course. I'd love to. She spent the next few days picking out the perfect dress. She wanted to look elegant and polished, someone who belonged in a room full of executives. When the night finally came, Ryan arrived in a sleek black suit and took her to the Westbridge headquarters. The lobby alone was breathtaking. Massive glass windows stretching to the ceiling, marble floors gleaming under the soft light, employees in tailored suits mingling over champagne. Mia felt a surge of pride walking in with Ryan. This was the world she wanted to be a part of. As the evening unfolded, Ryan introduced her to several colleagues and higher-ups. They exchanged polite smiles, shook hands, and asked her questions about her job. For the first time, Mia felt like she was standing on equal ground with them. Then the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice from the stage said, "Thank you for joining us tonight. Please welcome to the stage the man who has built this company into what it is today, our CEO." Mia turned toward the stage, curious. She had never seen the CEO before. Everyone said he was a mysterious man, rarely seen in public. She imagined someone tall, intimidating, in an expensive suit, radiating authority. And then she froze. Walking across the stage, his steps slow but steady, was David. Her David. Except he didn't look like the man who used to scrub floors and pack her lunches. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his posture straight, his presence commanding. His silver hair caught the light, and there was a quiet confidence in his expression as he approached the microphone. Mia's breath caught in her throat. That's your uncle?" Ryan whispered. Stunned, she couldn't even respond. Her heart was pounding in her chest, her mind spinning. David began to speak. His voice was calm, deep, and steady as he addressed the room. "Good evening," he said, his eyes sweeping over the audience. "I've spent many years walking these halls, watching this company grow from a small family business into a name known across the country. What most people don't know is that I've been here not only as a man in the boardroom, but as a man in the boiler room, the man on the night shift, the man with a mop in his hand." Soft murmurs rippled through the audience. David smiled faintly. "I chose to work as a janitor because I wanted to see this company from the ground up. I wanted to understand the challenges of every employee, from the executives to the people who sweep the floors. And I learned something valuable. No job is small. No work is meaningless. It is the people who do their jobs with dignity and heart who keep a company alive." Mia felt her throat tighten. She remembered every night he had come home exhausted, every meal he had skipped so she could eat, every late-night conversation about her dreams. He had been doing all of it while secretly running the company. "I've learned that success is not measured by the title you hold," David continued, his gaze firm. "It is measured by the sacrifices you make for others, by the way you treat those who have less, and by the values you refuse to compromise." Mia's eyes welled with tears. "And tonight," David said, "as we unveil this new initiative to support education for underprivileged youth, I want to remind everyone in this room, never forget the people who helped you become who you are. Gratitude is the foundation of true success." The room erupted in applause, but Mia barely heard it. Her world felt as though it had tilted on its axis. She had been ashamed of him, ashamed of the very man who had not only raised her, but had given her the life she had now. When the applause died down and the event resumed, Mia could barely focus on anything else. She stood off to the side, clutching her champagne glass with trembling fingers. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered to herself. When the speeches were over, Mia searched for him in the crowd. She found him talking to a group of executives, shaking hands and smiling politely. He looked so different from a man she had seen just weeks ago, sitting quietly in her apartment. "Uncle David," she said softly when she finally approached him. He turned, his expression calm but unreadable. "Mia, can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaking. He nodded and excused himself from the group. They stepped into a quieter corner of the room. "I had no idea," Mia said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "All this time you were—" "The CO," David finished gently. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" David's expression softened. "Because it wasn't about me, Mia. It was about you. I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of hard work, not thinking life was about handouts. I wanted you to see me as someone who was willing to work for what mattered, not as someone who could just write a check to solve every problem." Mia sobbed quietly. "I treated you so terribly. I said things I can't take back." David took a deep breath. "You were honest about how you felt. I can't fault you for that. But Mia," I need you to understand something. Who I am has never changed. Whether I'm sweeping floors or standing on the stage, I'm still the man who loves you, who raised you, who wanted nothing but the best for you. Mia nodded through her tears, guilt weighing heavily on her chest. I'm so sorry, Uncle David. For a moment, David said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek. You have a good heart, Mia, he said softly. But don't ever let the world make you forget where you came from. That's not the kind of success I worked so hard for you to have. Mia nodded again, her heart aching. In that moment, she realized that she didn't just owe him an apology. She owed him a change. The ride home that night was the longest of Mia's life. She barely spoke to Ryan, who kept glancing at her with concern. You okay? He asked softly. I will be, she whispered, staring out the window. When she got back to her apartment, she sat on the couch in silence for hours, still in her gown and heels. David's words echoed in her mind. Never forget the people who helped you become who you are. For the first time, she saw her own reflection clearly. Not the polished, ambitious woman she wanted the world to see, but a young woman who had turned her back on the man who had given her everything. The next morning, Mia couldn't shake the heavy ache in her chest. She tried calling David, but he didn't answer. She tried again that evening, leaving a voicemail through her tears. Uncle David, I'm sorry. Please call me back. Please. But David didn't respond. Days passed. Mia realized that an apology wasn't enough. Words were easy. She needed to show him that she meant it, that she had learned something from this painful experience. She started by taking a hard look at her own life. She stopped going to the endless parties and networking events that had once thrilled her. She distanced herself from friends who judged people by their status. She even had a difficult conversation with Ryan, who had been supportive but hesitant about David. If you can't respect my uncle for who he is, she said firmly, then we don't have a future. To her surprise, Ryan nodded. Mia, I respect him. I respect what he's done for you. If anything, I think I understand you better now. Mia smiled faintly. Then I have to make things right with him. She started visiting Westridge headquarters on weekends, not to see Ryan, but to volunteer for the very education initiative David had announced at the gala. She spent her time mentoring underprivileged students, sharing her story with them and helping them apply for scholarships. Slowly, word got back to David. One quiet Sunday morning, as Mia was sorting scholarship applications, she looked up and saw him standing in the doorway. He was dressed casually, his hands in his pockets, watching her with an unreadable expression. Uncle David, she said softly, her throat tightening. You've been busy, he said. Mia nodded. I needed to do something. I needed to prove to myself, to you, that I understand now. David walked into the room and sat across from her. And what is it that you understand? That none of this, she said, gesturing around them, means anything if I forget the person who made it possible. You sacrificed everything for me. I didn't just hurt you that night. I threw away the very values you raised me with, and I am so sorry. David studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Mia, I didn't need you to be perfect. I just needed you to remember who you are, and to never be ashamed of me or of yourself. Tears spilled down Mia's cheeks. I'm not ashamed anymore. I'm proud, so proud to be your niece. For the first time in weeks, David smiled. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then maybe we can start over. Mia nodded eagerly. I like that. From that day forward, their relationship began to heal. Mia didn't just say she had changed. She lived it. She invited David to her apartment for dinner every week, where she cooked for him instead of ordering takeout. She introduced him to her friends and co-workers, not as my uncle who raised me, but as the man who taught me what success really means. Eventually, David offered Mia a position at Westbridge, not as a favor, but as an opportunity. You'll start at the bottom, he told her firmly. Just like I did. You'll work your way up, and every achievement will be yours. Mia smiled. That's exactly what I want. And she did. She worked hard, earning respect through her performance, not her family name. Employees who once overlooked her began to see her as a capable, determined young woman. Every time she passed David in the hallway, he gave her a small nod, his eyes shining with quiet pride. Months later, at another company event, Mia stood on the same stage David had once stood on. This time, she was the one giving a speech, thanking the employees and sharing how Westbridge's scholarship program had changed her life. And most importantly, she said, glancing at David in the front row, "I want to thank the man who taught me that real success isn't measured by titles or wealth, but by the love and sacrifice we show for the people we care about." The room erupted in applause, and for the first time, Mia felt truly at peace. After the event, David hugged her tightly. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "So have we," Mia whispered. They stood there for a long moment, and for the first time in years, Mia felt like that little girl again, safe, loved, and deeply proud of the man who had raised her. This ending gives Mia a full redemption arc, shows her growth through actions, and closes with an emotional, hopeful resolution that ties back to the theme of humility, gratitude, and love.